It was a moonless night in the heart of Iowa, where the endless darkness seemed to devour the world, leaving only the skeletal silhouettes of cornstalks swaying ominously like silent sentinels guarding ancient secrets. I, Jack Harlan, found myself stranded in the middle of my vast field, my heart thundering in my chest like a relentless drumbeat echoing through the void. The whispers crept in first, not the innocent rustle of wind through leaves, nor the scurrying of nocturnal creatures, but insidious voices slithering between the dry, brittle stalks, coiling round my mind. They murmured my late wife's name with a haunting familiarity. Emma. Emma, join us in the harvest. I whirled around, my flashlight's beam slicing through the inky blackness like a desperate blade. And there they were, elongated shadows, twisted and unnatural, their eyes flickering with an otherworldly glow, like embers from some forgotten inferno. They flitted between the rows with inhuman speed, closing in, their forms blurring into the night. Panic surged through me as I turned to flee toward my old pickup truck, my boots sinking into the soft, loamy soil. But then it happened. A frigid grip seized my ankle, not a hand of flesh and bone, but something slimy and tendril-like, yanking me downward with merciless force into the cold, clutching earth. I screamed, my voice raw and echoing futilely across the empty fields, thrashing wildly until I bolted upright in bed, drenched in sweat. No, that wasn't just a nightmare. It was the culmination of horrors that had been building for weeks. That was the night everything descended into pure hell. But to make sense of it, let me take you back to the beginning. Step by step, my name is Jack Harlan, a 50-year-old farmer who spent his entire life tied to this land in rural Iowa. This sprawling farm has been passed down through my family for generations. A legacy of hard work and quiet endurance amid the golden waves of corn that stretch as far as the eye can see under the relentless summer sun. But come fall, those same fields transform into something foreboding. A labyrinth of secrets whispering under the harvest moon. 2 years ago, I lost my wife, Emma, to a brutal battle with cancer. She was my anchor, her gentle laugh, the way she hummed old folk tunes while cooking our simple suppers by the crackling fireplace. Her absence left a void that swallowed the joy from my days, turning the farm into a hollow shell of isolation. I threw myself into the daily grind, plowing, planting, and praying for a good yield. But this season was cursed from the start. Torrential rains flooded the lowlands, swarms of pests ravaged the crops, and market prices for corn plummeted to rock bottom. I was barely scraping by, living in solitude with only my faithful old hound, Max. For company, his loyal eyes, a small comfort in the growing emptiness. The folks around here, in this tight-knit rural community, love spinning yarns about the supernatural. They'd gather at the local diner or over fences and recount tales of corn spirits, ethereal beings rooted in Native American lore, cursing the soil in retribution for the bloody massacres inflicted by early settlers who stole the land. I'd always dismissed it as pure folklore, chuckling at their superstitions while sipping my black coffee. Ain't nothing but old wives' tales, I'd say, shaking my head. But a few weeks prior to that fateful night, the whispers, both literal and figurative, began to seep into my reality. Neighbors started murmuring about eerie lights dancing in the fields after sunset, and mysterious crop circles materializing overnight, etched into the earth like demonic sigils. Old Man Thompson, the grizzled veteran living a couple of miles down the dusty road, pulled me aside one afternoon with a grave expression. "You best not wander out after dusk, Jack," he rasped, his voice laced with whiskey and warning. "They're out there, and they're hungry for souls like yours." I waved him off, attributing his ramblings to too many lonely nights and cheap liquor. Then came that pivotal evening when Max erupted into a frenzy of barking. He planted himself at the screen door, fur bristling along his spine, his gaze fixed intently on the encroaching darkness of the cornfield. I flung the door open, snatching my flashlight from the hook, and shouted into the void, "Who's out there? Show yourself." The only reply was the indifferent sigh of the wind, but Max's growls intensified, refusing to subside. Determined to put an end to whatever was spooking him, I resolved to investigate. I figured it was probably just mischievous kids from town pulling pranks or some wandering wildlife scavenging for scraps. Little did I know, that decision marked the beginning of my descent into terror. The first thread unraveling in a tapestry of nightmares. Asterisk, with my shotgun slung securely over one shoulder for reassurance. I ventured into the enveloping embrace of the cornfield, the beam from my flashlight piercing the thick veil of night like a hesitant explorer. The air hung heavy with a crisp chill that belied the lingering warmth of early fall, seeping through my flannel shirt and raising faint goosebumps on my arms. Each step I took crunched softly against the fallen leaves and husks, creating a rhythmic whisper that seemed to echo back at me mockingly from the shadows. I called out for Max to follow, my voice steady but edged with unspoken unease. Yet the old dog halted abruptly at the field's perimeter, his body rigid as he let out a series of plaintive howls that chilled me to the bone. "Come on, boy, it's nothing," I urged, attempting to infuse confidence into my words, though a knot of doubt twisted in my gut. Asterisk, deeper into the maze of stalks I pressed, the corn towering above me like silent guardians, their leaves brushing against my sleeves with ghostly fingers. That's when I stumbled upon a peculiar circle etched into the ground, spanning roughly 15 feet in diameter. The corn within had been meticulously flattened, forming an intricate spiral pattern that spiraled inward with unnerving precision. There were no telltale footprints marring the soil, no signs of heavy machinery or human interference. It was as if an invisible force had descended from the heavens and pressed the crops down in a deliberate design. Kneeling down, I ran my fingers over the bent stalks. They felt unnaturally fresh, their green hues vibrant under the flashlight's glow, without a hint of wilting or decay. "What in God's name is this?" I whispered to myself, my pulse quickening as memories of those crop circle legends flooded my mind. The ones locals attributed to extraterrestrial visitors or vengeful spirits lurking in the earth. Abruptly, a distinct rustling sound shattered the stillness knot, the gentle sway induced by a breeze. But something deliberate, moving parallel to my position just a few rows away. It slithered through the corn with calculated stealth, raising the hairs on the back of my neck. I hoisted the shotgun, sweeping the light in frantic arcs. "Come out now. I know your hiding eye won't hesitate." My challenge hung unanswered in the air, met only by oppressive silence and deepening shadows. Panic rising, I bolted back toward the safety of the farmhouse, Max racing ahead as if pursued by unseen demons. Once inside, I slammed the door shut, sliding the bolt home with trembling hands, and collapsed into a chair by the wood stove. Pouring a generous shot of whiskey, I tried to steady my nerves. "It has to be animals," I rationalized aloud, staring into the flickering flames. "Maybe a family of raccoons or a stray deer causing mischief." Nothing more, but dawn brought fresh unease. As I shuffled into the kitchen for coffee, my eyes landed on Emma's cherished photo album, sprawled open across the table. The pages were turned precisely to our wedding photos, capturing her in that white dress, her eyes sparkling with joy. I could swear on my life that I'd packed it away in the basement months ago, buried under layers of dust and forgotten mementos. The cover was indeed dusty, yet the inner pages gleamed as if freshly handled. Flipping through them slowly, a wave of grief washed over me, tightening my throat. Who could have done this? I muttered, methodically checking every window and door for signs of forced entry. Nothing, perhaps, in a haze of exhaustion or alcohol the night before. I'd retrieved it myself and forgotten. It was a flimsy excuse. But I clung to it desperately, unwilling to entertain darker possibilities. The hours of daylight dragged on interminably, filled with mundane chores that failed to distract me. As twilight descended once more, sleep eluded me entirely. Lying in bed, I strained my ears against the quiet, and the faint rustling from the distant field returned, persistent and inviting, as though beckoning me back into its depths. For the first time in my solitary existence, a profound sense of not being alone settled over me like a shroud, heavy and inescapable. The grip of insomnia tightened around me like an invisible vice, refusing to release its hold. By the second night, the weight of uncertainty became unbearable, compelling me to arm myself once again with flashlight and shotgun before stepping out into the oppressive darkness. The moon was absent, casting the field into a vast, impenetrable sea of black that seemed to pulse with hidden life. I made a beeline for the site of the previous night's discovery, my boots crunching rhythmically over the uneven ground. The circle was still there, mocking me with its presence, but now it appeared subtly expanded, its edges creeping outward as if the pattern itself were alive and growing under the cover of night. That's when the whispers truly began to manifest. They started faintly, almost indistinguishable from a passing breeze. Fragmented phrases like "join us," "harvest time is near," drifting through the air. The voices weren't in crisp, recognizable English. Instead, they blended into an eerie chorus, reminiscent of dry leaves scraping against one another, interwoven with faint human intonations that sent shivers racing down my spine. I froze in place, every muscle tensed, and swung the flashlight beam in wide, desperate circles. Who's out there? This isn't some joke show, yourselves. My demands echoed hollowly, unanswered, but the rustling grew more insistent, encircling me like a predator toying with its prey. In a fleeting moment, I caught a glimpse of something unnatural, towering silhouette with limbs stretched unnaturally long, like gnarled branches warped by some malevolent force, gliding seamlessly between the dense rows of corn. It moved with a fluidity too swift and silent for any mortal being. One of these shadows brushed perilously close, its ethereal form grazing my arm with a touch as cold as winter's frost, instantly raising a trail of goose flesh. Instinct took over. I squeezed the trigger, the shotgun's boom reverberating through the night like thunder, the recoil jolting my shoulder. The shot vanished into the void, striking nothing tangible. Breath coming in ragged gasps, I retreated hastily to the farmhouse, my mind reeling from the encounter. Come morning, the barn revealed another layer of strangeness. My sickles and pliers had been meticulously rearranged on the workbench, forming an intricate symbol of interlocking spirals that mirrored the crop circle's design. Unsettled to my core, I hopped into my truck and drove over to Old Man Thompson's ramshackle place. Over steaming mugs of bitter coffee, I hesitantly broached the subject. "You notice anything peculiar in your fields lately?" He fixed me with a piercing gaze, his weathered face creased with knowing lines. "It's the reapers, Jack. Ancient watchers of these cornfields, born from the old days when famine gripped the land and settlers turned savage, devouring their own in desperation. They prey on the isolated, the heartbroken souls like you. Drawing strength from our despair." I forced a nervous laugh, dismissing his words as the ravings of an old-timer. But the gravity in his eyes lingered, planting seeds of doubt. "Lock your doors come nightfall," he added solemnly as I left. Back home, his cautionary tale echoed in my thoughts, and I found myself reaching for the whiskey bottle more frequently that evening, seeking solace in its numbing embrace to quell the rising tide of fear that threatened to overwhelm me by the third night. The entities had shed their subtlety, growing increasingly audacious in their manifestations. As I lay restless in bed, staring at the cracked ceiling beams, a voice pierced the silence from beyond the window. Emma's voice, unmistakable and laced with anguish. "Jack, please help me. I'm trapped out here in the cold, ... It rang clear and poignant, tugging at the frayed strings of my heart. My blood turned to ice in my veins. I bolted upright, snatching the shotgun from beside the bed, my pulse pounding like a hammer against an anvil. With a mix of dread and desperate hope, I flung open the door and plunged into the night once more. The field hummed with an undercurrent of whispers, a cacophony that seemed to guide my steps deeper into its labyrinthine heart, pulling me inexorably forward. There, ensnared amid a cluster of stalks, gleamed Emma's long-lost necklace, the delicate gold chain adorned with a heart-shaped locket that she'd misplaced during one of our carefree picnics years ago. How could it possibly be here, unearthed after all this time? Shadows began to coalesce around me, dark forms that mirrored my every movement with eerie precision, like malevolent doppelgangers lurking just out of reach. As I bent to retrieve the necklace, my foot caught on something protruding from the soil, jagged, bony protrusions that felt disturbingly like skeletal fingers clawing upward from the depths. Grasping at my boot with insistent hunger, I wrenched myself free with a guttural cry, pumping the shotgun and unleashing the barrage into the encroaching darkness, the blasts illuminating fleeting glimpses of twisted shapes retreating into the corn. Adrenaline fueled my escape back to the house, where I barricaded every entrance with furniture and boards, my body slick with sweat and trembling uncontrollably. Pacing the creaky floors, I questioned my sanity. Were these vivid hallucinations born from unresolved grief, amplified by isolation and stress, or was something far more sinister at play? In a futile attempt to calm my frayed nerves, I swallowed a handful of sleeping pills. But slumber brought only tormented visions of Emma decaying amid the stalks, her decayed form extending withered arms in a silent plea for me to join her eternal rest. Asterisk, driven by a mounting desperation that bordered on obsession. I turned to the glow of my computer screen for answers, scouring online forums and obscure websites dedicated to Iowa's rich tapestry of folklore. The tales were chilling, accounts of Cornfield entities woven into the fabric of history, linked to the devastating famines of the 19th century when pioneer families starved in these very fields, or even wilder theories of extraterrestrial abductions masquerading as supernatural hauntings. Armed with this newfound knowledge, I devised a plan, rigging the perimeter of the expanding crop circle with motion-activated cameras and heavy-duty bear traps, hoping to capture irrefutable evidence of whatever lurked out there. as darkness enveloped the farm that fourth night. The cameras sprang to life, their footage revealing horrors that defied explanation, pairs of luminescent eyes piercing the gloom, accompanied by grotesque, distorted figures methodically plucking ears of corn from the stalks. But intermingled with their actions were blood-curdling screams that sounded achingly human, echoing through the speakers like souls in torment. Reviewing the playback in the dim light of my office, a profound chill settled over me, freezing me in place. Come morning, the nightmare escalated. Max had vanished without a trace. Frantic, I scoured the yard and fields, his name tearing from my throat in hoarse shouts. But all I discovered were crimson paw prints staining the earth, trailing ominously into the heart of the corn before abruptly vanishing. Paranoia consumed me entirely by dinner time. As I sat at the table, mechanically spooning corn chowder into my mouth, a staple from the farm's yield, my gaze fixated on the kernels floating in the broth. To my horror, they seemed to morph before my eyes, forming leering faces twisted in agony and silent supplication. With a roar of terror, I hurled the bowl against the wall, shattering it into fragments as I screamed into the empty room. Whatever malevolent force inhabited the fields had infiltrated not just my land, but the very recesses of my mind, blurring the line between reality and madness. Asterisk, I could no longer flee from the encroaching dread. It was time to confront it head-on. Equipped with my shotgun, a powerful flashlight, and several cans of gasoline strapped to my back, I marched into the field for what I vowed would be the final time. This ends tonight, I bellowed into the void, my voice cracking with a mix of rage and fear. The whispers, once subtle, now swelled into rhythmic chants, their words unveiling a terrifying origin story. These were the tormented spirits of settlers who perished in the brutal famines of the 1800s, cursed to wander eternally, sustaining themselves by harvesting the souls of the living to quench their insatiable hunger. In a surge of revelation, the entities revealed their true forms: emaciated figures cloaked in ragged husks of corn, their skin cracked and fibrous like dried vegetation, from which sprouted writhing tendrils resembling gnarled roots. Their eyes were bottomless voids, radiating a primal, devouring emptiness that pulled at my very essence. The field itself began to warp around me, the orderly rows of corn shifting and twisting into an ever-changing maze, disorienting my senses and trapping me in a nightmarish labyrinth. I broke into a sprint, lungs burning as I dodged the lashing tendrils that whipped out from the shadows, seeking to ensnare me, trapped within the colossal heart of an enormous crop circle that pulsed with dark energy. A barrage of visions assaulted my mind, imposed by the entity's malevolent will. Through these forced revelations, the truth unraveled. Emma's death hadn't been a mere tragedy of illness. These creatures had orchestrated it, luring her into the fields during her final, weakened days, feasting on her escalating suffering to bolster their ethereal existence. They thrived on the raw essence of human anguish, growing more potent with each cycle of the harvest moon, preying on the vulnerable and isolated. One of the reapers lunged, its form merging with mine in a horrifying possession, forcing me to relive Emma's excruciating final moments in vivid, agonizing detail. But fueled by fury, I resisted, dousing the surrounding corn with gasoline and igniting it with a match. Flames erupted in a roaring inferno, consuming the stalks and eliciting piercing shrieks from the entities. In a climactic act, I shattered Emma's necklace, their spectral anchor, against a rock, severing their hold and weakening their assault. Asterisk, the remaining entities converged in a frenzied swarm, their tendrils coiling around my limbs and dragging me downward into a network of subterranean tunnels woven from pulsating roots and earthen walls. Clawing at the dirt in blind panic, I recalled the farm's irrigation system, lifeline of pipes buried beneath the soil. With Herculean effort, I reached a nearby valve and twisted it open, unleashing a torrent of water that flooded the passages, drowning the root-like appendages in a churning deluge. Their wails crescendoed into a symphony of despair before fading, their forms dissolving into nothingness. Yet, as I emerged gasping into the night air, one final whisper lingered. "We shall return with the next planting season." I staggered free, the field now a smouldering ruin under the stars. Miraculously, I survived that ordeal, my body marred by burns and deep scars that served as permanent reminders of the nightmare. The local authorities arrived the next day, dismissing the devastation as a bizarre agricultural fire sparked by unknown causes, asking few questions and offering even fewer answers. Overwhelmed by the trauma, I sold the farm at a loss to the first bidder, packing my meager belongings and relocating to a cramped apartment in Des Moines, swearing an oath to never set foot in those cursed fields again. The city's bustling streets and glaring lights provided a stark contrast, gradually muffling the echoes of terror, though nagging doubts persisted. Had it all been a descent into madness, or a genuine brush with the supernatural? Corn imagery haunted my daily life in billboards' advertising feed, kernels in supermarket aisles, and even recurring dreams where the stalks encroached upon my urban sanctuary, several months into my new life. As I lounged in the dim glow of my apartment, a faint whispering emanated from an innocuous potted plant on the windowsill, solitary corn sprout that had germinated from a stray kernel I'd unwittingly carried with me in my haste to escape. The entities had followed, their essence embedded in that tiny seed. The harvest is eternal. It resides within us all, the voice intoned, growing stronger. Panic surged as tendrils began to unfurl from the soil, reaching toward me in the confined space. If this tale sent shivers down your spine and left you glancing over your shoulder, smash that like button and subscribe for more spine-tingling Midwest horror stories straight from the heartland. Have you ever heard eerie whispers carried on the wind during a late-night walk, or spotted something unnatural in a field under the moonlight? Drop your own creepy experiences in the comments below. I read every one. And remember, folks, stay clear of those cornfields after dark. You never know what's lurking in the rows. Thanks for watching, and sweet dreams. Or not.